morning, ladies and gentlemen. I want to start by thanking Metal Bulletin to having invited my colleague Graham Mori and myself to share some of our thoughts with you this morning. One of the slides which Ron was showing put Indonesia as the #1 exporter of bauxite to China. And Guinea was almost one of the very last. I think that over the years, we will all see Guinea coming up, really up on top. Guinea, as we all know, has one of the most important bauxite resources in the world. Some statistics put it at 30 billion tons of bauxite, some put it at a bit higher, at a bit lower. But when you start talking of billions, it's no more important how many billion. Guinea has a lot of bauxite reserves and has very good quality bauxite, which is not expensive to process. And these reserves in Guinea are not landlocked. Well, the presentation doesn't seem to be moving forward. Maybe Ron, you can. There we are. Okay. Excellent. It's a touch. Okay. I'm learning. Guinea is not landlocked like many other countries. Guinea has access to the ocean, has a lot of rivers where you can transport bauxite by barges, and it has a lot of such advantages. But in the last 40 years, only 2 companies, namely CBG and CBK, have been exporting bauxite. CBG is one of the largest, or probably the largest, open pit mine in the world. But in the last 40 years, many licenses, hundreds of licenses have been given out to various companies, big and small, majors, miners, all sorts of people have had licenses, but yet not a single ton of bauxite has been exported other than from those 2 companies. The only alumina refinery in Guinea which was being developed by Global Alumina, together with BHP Billiton, Dubai, Mubadala, and some other joint venture partners, $800 million were spent over the years, but there again today, there is no refinery. And I don't see any refineries being built in the near future, certainly not in this part of the decade. Frigia, which used to be an alumina refinery in Guinea, which was at one stage run by the government of Guinea, and it was producing 700,000 tons at a very reasonable cost, is today shut, and it's not producing a single ton of alumina. The railway is not working either. Then you have many other companies who have come other than the ones I just mentioned. AMC, Vauxhall, CPI, Anglo-African, Chinese companies, and a lot of other such companies have come, have started mining, they have spent a lot of money, and yet no bauxite is being exported. 3 major companies today are looking also at exporting. Mubadala through EGA and GAC, Rusal, and the Chinese. But they still have to spend hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars before they start exporting and building the infrastructure necessary for that. Ron touched on infrastructure, and I'll talk about it a little bit more later on. Now, why is the state of affairs in Guinea? How come Guinea, having those bauxite reserves and all these companies to come and go, how come Guinea is not exporting any bauxite? I would like in the next few minutes to look at the reasons for this. And the reasons are equally to be shared, and the shortcomings have to be shared really by both the state as well as the investors and developers. let's look first at what has been going on well, wrong, there we are, a few times. First, let's look at the state's problems. The mining code in 1997, which was established then as a revision of previous mining codes, was a really good and fair mining code. When the new regime in 2010 came over and the new government came in place, and one of the first things that they started doing is to build a new mining code. All sorts of international consultants came and started giving their ideas, and they had all sorts of advice to give the government. And it really took a very long time for the government to be able to come up with a mining code. In the meantime, what happened is that all business really came to a standstill, if you like, and people started not developing as fast as they were, if at all, because waiting for the new mining code. Finally, the first version of the mining code came out. It was really not a very attractive one to investors, and everybody started complaining, including the Chamber of Mines. Internally in Guinea, there were lots of complaints. Externally, by companies, there were lots of complaints. So finally, they revised this, and it took a long time to revise it until they came up with a new mining code, which was, I must say, not as investor-friendly as the first mining code was in 1997. But it is there, it is being applied. It has many disadvantages. One of the biggest advantages, in my opinion, is the 15% carrot that has to be given out to the state. I think this is a very high premium to pay by investors. 15% carrot free of charge on a $1 billion, $2 billion project is a lot of money, and it makes the project rather uneconomic if you do that. Now, there are variations to that. For example, if you're going to just do a bauxite mine, you pay 15%. If it's bauxite and alumina, you pay 7.5%. If it is only alumina, you pay 5%. So anyway, you know, they're not really properly in this order, and they can be the other way around, and nobody knows why they are the way they are. But having said that, this sort of thing reduces tremendously the feasibility of any project. In Australia, for example, as we all know, the government provides cash incentives to investors who want to come and start mining bauxite or other matters. In Guinea, we are doing exactly the opposite. We are making people pay a premium to come in. And this, I think, is quite a burden on any project. In any case, in my opinion, if the Guinean government is going to continue insisting to get this free carrot, they should at least take out the infrastructure portion of any project out of the free carrot. Because today, most of the money that is being spent in mining is really on the infrastructure. So at least this infrastructure component should be taken out of any free carrot they have to be given. Now, the code also envisages that a 20% option for the government remains if they wish to add to their ownership. I personally believe that governments all over the world, not only in Guinea, should not be in the business of owning parts of companies. They shouldn't be involved in running companies. They shouldn't be involved in sitting on boards. Governments need to make money from royalties, they need to make money from taxes, they need to make money from creating employment. And that is the most important thing a government has to do, rather than being parts of companies and trying to raise money, which is needed for so many other things. For example, if the government of Guinea wants to take 20% in some project, they are much better off to raise that money to do some infrastructure work, which is very, very badly needed. So all these points on the mining code have to be, in my opinion, looked at again to see what can be done. There we are. I think you have to do it 4 or 5 times. Okay. The second problem I think that we can look at, or the second shortcoming, I don't want to really call it a problem, but it's more like a shortcoming, are the mining permits and licenses. Over the years, there have been hundreds of mining permits given out. And I think the state should be a little bit more selective in giving permits based on merit and rather than other considerations. Merit and qualifications in giving out licenses is very important. One of the other things that the mining code requires is that after a license is given, an investor or developer has 3 years to look at the feasibility study, make all the studies, and then after 3 years, they have to give up really half of the area that they were given. I think that this has to be also looked at again, because making all these studies and then spending months and months to see which area to give up. So everybody tries to give up the area that is not good or they don't want. Some other companies like in Simandou on the iron ore, the area they gave out was like a Swiss cheese Gruyere. It was bits and pieces of holes here and there, and nobody can do anything with that anyway. So what I think should happen is that the developer or investor should have the right to keep the whole area if they think it is feasible and that they can do something with it. And this way it will be encouraging for them to go faster and do things faster rather than worrying too much about what to give up. The other thing that I think developers should be able to do is to start with pilot projects. Very shortly after they start their feasibility study, they should be able to take a little portion of that license that they have, start exporting from that license through barges or anything like that. This is good because it provides much needed experience on how to do things for the developer in the country. Number 2, it gives some revenue to the developer. And number 3, the government starts making royalties. And this is good, and taxes, of course, and this is good in every respect. The final thing is that I think that the mining process of giving a concession should be really streamlined and become much easier to do. Now, by the time you move from a license to a concession, everybody has to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on lawyers, long meetings, to have the concessions put it that way. There we go. This gives you an idea of all the licenses that have been given out over the years. This is what was the situation last year. As you can see, there are all these licenses there. But the only bauxite that is being produced is by CBG. SBK is a different situation, but they also produce. But in that main area of the bauxite where you see there, which is around, well, it's supposed to work. No. Anyway, so that's really, you could see on the map all these licenses and no bauxite is being used. The other point that I would like to also raise, which is also a bit of a shortcoming, I think, is, is the revision of agreements. Every time a new government comes in place, the first thing they do is they create an interministerial committee to sit and start reviewing concession agreements, licenses, permits, and everything. So this creates a lot of anxiety. Everybody is anxious. Nobody wants to continue work because they say, oh my God, what are they doing? They're going to take my license away or keep it or give it. So there is all this anxiety that is created in reviewing licenses. I think this has to be reviewed, definitely. Licenses and permits and agreements and conventions are, of course, to be looked at on a regular basis. They have to be really monitored. And the best people to monitor it is the Ministry of Mines. One of the most important jobs of the Ministry of Mines is to monitor all agreements to see what's going wrong. If there's something wrong, you rectify it. If there is nothing wrong, you keep the guy, give him the confidence to keep on mining. And same way, the companies have to also see to what extent the government is keeping up to the terms of the agreement. So this process should be much more a monitoring process rather than creating all this anxiety of everybody trying to see what's going to happen and lose confidence in what they are doing. And if they are complying, those who are complying, as I said before, they should have the confidence to keep on continuing developing and not lose the momentum. Because one of the biggest problems for developers is the moment they lose momentum for any reason, be it a revision of a mining or be it, unfortunately now, things like we cannot control, but the Ebola crisis and all that, they lose momentum. And the moment they lose momentum, the timings change, and the market timing is always very important. Look at what happened now in Indonesia. If Guinea was exporting bauxite now and had the capability to export bauxite, with the Indonesian situation, they would have been able to export so much bauxite. Now, hopefully, this will happen in the very near future, but imagine that if we start having bauxite exports in 4 or 5 years, and then the demand in China changes, or the Indonesian situation changes. So timing is really a very important project, very important basis. Even if you look at iron ore, look at Simandou, with all the delays, Guinea was supposed to be exporting iron ore in 2012, 2011. We are 2015, and there is nothing in the works that Guinea is going to start exporting iron ore from Simandou. And what happened? In the meantime, the price of iron ore halved. So now it's no more a question whether the infrastructure is there, or it's no more a question whether all the agreements are in place. It's the question of the price. So timing is very important, and it applies to iron ore or bauxite or gold or whatever, or petrol, or oil and gas. The fourth important shortcoming of Guinea, and Ron touched on this subject about infrastructure. Infrastructure is extremely important, and it's the biggest hindrance, I think, to the development of the project anywhere in the world, and Guinea, of course, is a specific example of that, where the infrastructure is lacking today, and there are lots of plans to improve the infrastructure. There is a 130-kilometer railway which links the Sangaredi area to the port. And this railway is owned by the government. It's a very important asset. It's been operated very successfully over the years by CBG, who carry, for the time being, around 15 million tons of bauxite on it to the port. It's a very efficient system, which is run by CBG. It really is run by the Guineans for Guinea. If you really want, that's how it is. It shows you how efficient things can happen in Guinea when they are there. Now, but with a railway of this nature, it is very important that it is shared by all the users in the area. When Global Alumina and GAC were building their refinery, they had an agreement with CBG to share this railway. And this was really the most important agreement they had, because that's what was going to allow it to happen. Today, it's the same thing, in the sense that GAC, Rusal, and the bauxite EGA, Mubadala are buying. They have agreements with the government, with NIM, with CBG for shared infrastructure. I think shared infrastructure is the most important thing that can happen in any developing nation, and most specifically in Guinea. And as we all know, building infrastructure is extremely expensive, and very few companies can afford it. Even the majors cannot afford to build all that infrastructure, let alone minor companies who come in, who need infrastructure. All the minor companies, if we want to call them minor, although I don't think we should call them, some people call them junior, minor, whatever. Let's say not the majors. They don't have funds, they cannot raise funds to build infrastructure. The only people who can raise funds to build infrastructure is the state. But for the state to be able to do this, they need very strong offtake agreements with the users, take or pay agreements with the users. Once the state has that, whether it's for railway or for port or for anything else, then they can raise a lot of money and build it themselves. Now, which brings me to the point that I believe it's the state who should take the lead in all this. The state should be the state should be leading this effort of building infrastructure, whether it is rail, whether it is port, and raise the money to do it, and not be at the mercy of the investor developer. Look at Simandou. Simandou, which is being developed by a major company plus other companies. Why isn't it exporting iron ore? Because the developer saying, I don't have the infrastructure. And to do the infrastructure, I need 6 billion, 15 billion, whatever, and they can't do it. So we have to turn things around. The state should prepare all this and then come and tell the developer, here we are. I have the infrastructure for you. It is already, you have to make an agreement with me after your feasibility studies of how to build the infrastructure, how to build your mining projects so that you can start exporting. I think that's very important. This slide here shows you the various transport corridors that are available in Guinea or should be developed. The one on the lower right, the one in black, that's the Simandou project, which is the iron ore, and the other two. The one up top on red is the CBG project, and the one there is the other ones. Major companies are trying to work on these. Once you have the right ports, once you have everything in place. Today, for example, the CBG is expanding their port. GAC, GIGA have to have their port too. But in my opinion, instead of each one doing their own thing, I think it's the state who should conclude take or pay agreements with the users of the ports and then raise the money which they can once you have those offtake agreements, and then build the ports themselves, the state, have the people, have the companies use it, and the state can start getting revenues from these instead of the revenues going to somebody else. I think it's a very important thing to do, and the state should think of this very, very carefully. And then when you have that port, which is owned by the state, other people can use it. For example, Alufer, who is building a mine to the south of the port area there in red. It would be much easier for them, rather than building a $150 million port, for them to build a rail link up north to the port, which is the CBG Kamgad port, which hopefully will be the government's port. And this way they can progress and they can start building their mine and exporting aluminum. That's an example of just one of the examples that I would like to put. Now, of course, having said all this, we come to the shortcomings of the investor. This is what the state has to do, in my opinion, and has not done. But the investors and developers take a big share of the blame for the way things are today in Guinea. And especially, it's the major companies. They come and they go. Because the major companies, such as BHP, Alcoa, Rio, whatever, all these, the Chinese, they have different strategies for Guinea. They come, the market changes, they sell their assets, they sell their certain, like BHP. The BHP is no more in Bauxite and Alumina as such in Guinea. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars on their concession, then they sold it for $1. They spent hundreds of millions of dollars for the refinery with GAC, then they sold it for $1. So the majors have to have a different type of incentive to stay in the country and develop it if they are given the concessions that they are. And the only way to do this is to have any company who has a feasibility study and has prepared a plan. They have to stick to their plan if everything else is equal. And if they don't, then they have to pay penalties. They have to pay penalties, they have to pay their share of the royalties, so that the state is not penalized. Now the state is penalized. Anybody can come, take a concession, start working, they don't like it, the market changes, they pack and they leave. No, it's not fair to the state. The state has to have its own penalties on all these things. I'm almost finished. The words of wisdom are just coming now. So, but having said all that, a couple of minutes wrong on my fence. Having said all that, I would like to emphasize one thing. The situation in Guinea is not grim. On the contrary, I think Guinea has a lot of potential. Guinea has many advantages. It has a very stable government. It has a good judicial system in place. The government is very keen, and the president of the country is very keen to have development of the country to improve the economic status of its population. So all these things are very important for them. One of the things you can see how many people from Guinea are here today. It shows you the importance Guinea places on all this, on the development of the country. In Guinea, you have a very good labor market of educated people who can work. And you don't have to get expatriates to do projects. The Guineans are very, very capable people who can do that. The Ministry of Mines has very capable people who are very able to go on with projects in a very professional way. Many Guinean managers, Guineans who have studied abroad and are very well thought of, are running the major companies. An example is GAC, is run by a Guinean. CBG is run by Guineans. And all these companies, so the things in Guinea are all ready for a very important development. Just certain things have to be changed for that. And some very important investments are being made by the UAE. The UAE through GAC, through IGA, through Mubadala, have some very important programs which are in place, and this would be very good for Guinea. So they are both in infrastructure and in bauxite, and these things shows you the importance that Guinea has. And of course, as I said, CBG's expansion. CBG is expanding its bauxite capabilities, and that is something very positive. So there are lots of positive things happening in Guinea. In conclusion, I hope what I spoke about is not very disheartening in any way. On the contrary, I want to show how Guinea can be a very important market player in bauxite. Certain things have to be done for this to happen, and I hope that this will happen very soon. Thank you very much indeed.